When the Fourmile fire occurred, I had just made a wonderful breakfast for my family, and we were sitting around relaxed when we first heard the sirens right around 10 o'clock on September 6th, Labor Day, the day the fire started. And we immediately listened to the scanner, and over the next several minutes and over the next several hours, it became very clear that this was going to be a very large, very devastating fire event. Honestly, my first impression was, I can't believe this. I thought we were going to be spared. It didn't seem like it was abnormally high fire danger, but that was deceptive because it had been moist a few days prior, but then we'd had several days for it to dry out. And so then our second thought was, oh my gosh, this fire is growing so large, so rapidly, that this is going to be a very, very serious fire event. Unlike most fire events we see on the 1 to 5 year scale. For me, it was a little bit of an irony. I've prepared so many other homes in the face of wildfire. For me, it felt a little odd to be actually prepping my own home before evacuation. It's kind of like, I shouldn't be doing this. There's something wrong here. This was supposed to take place elsewhere, not right here on my own property. It was an unsafe situation because there were so many people who were uncertain about their homes, and they were hearing rumors, and it was terrible because people were so agitated that people were trying to get past the roadblocks. They were trying to hike across the mountains to get back to their homes, and I thought that was overall a very unsafe and unwise situation. So I made the very personal decision to go back on the fire and apply all of my firefighter skills and knowledge to, as safely as possible, ascertain where the damage was and what the extent of the damage was. So there was this whole taxonomy of certain things would go out over an email blast, certain things would go on my Facebook page, certain things would go out over Twitter, but I would very carefully proctor, I would very carefully curate what would go out over each of those mediums. By the time I went out over Twitter, I wanted to make sure it was useful but generic and sort of depersonalized. I went up on the fire on Tuesday because there was a general lack of information, and there were a lot of people directly affected by the fire. It felt very different. The networks of communication that were available felt much more vast and much more comprehensive. Even as recently as 10 years ago, I think you're pretty much beholden to public press releases and listening to the AM radio, or maybe trying to watch TV and trying to glean information that way. But I think with the very low friction to communication that we have today, there was so much information flowing in all directions. Now, mind you, some of the information was bad, much of it was repetitive, but still there was a lot of good information happening and being shared in near real time. I think there's much to learn. I think it's evolving so rapidly that we're playing catch up. But I think one thing is clear, is that it's a very, very useful and vital tool. Based on everything I've seen, I'm a big fan of actually doing individual work on your individual property to make your home and your structures as defensible as possible. I don't think it's unreasonable to imagine a world where many of the homes are well prepared, they're well landscaped, they're well maintained, and that firefighters, thank goodness, won't have to put their lives on the line for each and every home, but maybe they can start fighting fires, more strategically. Because if a firefighter doesn't have to worry about protecting, individual homes, they can start, thinking bigger picture. So I think that's a very reasonable and a very practical goal that I think we're moving towards. And at the end of the day, I think if you can make your home so that it's very unlikely it'll burn, I think that's really what it's all about. And we have the resources to do that. I have the time and the energy to do that. And I think most people up here do. As I did that on Tuesday, I had a very profound sense that there were not very many resources in the Sunshine community. And this is the Sunshine Fire Protection District. I saw a few fire trucks. They were saving a garage here, working fires in other places. But overall, for the amount of fire activity we had and for the type of fire behavior we had, it really seemed like there was a general lack of resources. Furthermore, it seemed like there were a lot of resources being sent to other parts of the fire that were somehow more prominent. Like, well, that's where the fire started, so they're sending all their resources to, A, B, and C. But what they didn't really appreciate was that homes were continuing to burn on Tuesday with no firefighting resources to defend them, not even to prepare the structures in advance of the fire. I think there were some inefficiencies in the overall communication structure in the command of the fire, even though overall the fire was a huge success in terms of the suppression efforts. And I would have to say the fact that we had no loss of life and no serious injuries really is important to keep in mind, because had we lost anybody, that would have changed the fire drastically. But still, I think objectively, based on everything I saw, it seemed like there was a lack of resources in this one particular community. The Fourmile fire had a very immediate impact, of course. In our little fire protection district, losing a third of the homes was just devastating. Those who still had a home, once they were finally allowed back to their house, had to drive past this, this blackened wasteland. And I can't fully express the sorrow or grief you feel when you drive by and where your neighbor's home used to be is now nothing. I don't mean a tumbled down house. I don't mean boards. I don't mean beams. I mean nothing. It's as though it was erased from the landscape. And emotionally, that's very difficult. The lessons we're learning now are lessons about community and about rebuilding and about the very heart and essence of any community. This fire struck at the very heart of the Sunshine community, which is a small community to start with. And so to have a third of the homes destroyed within the Sunshine Fire Protection District made a huge impact. I think there's a lot we can and have learned about living with wildfire. I think we've gotten a lot more mature and a lot more sophisticated, not just as homeowners, but I mean as a community and as fire agencies. We understand fire behavior a lot better. We understand human behavior a lot better. We understand fire mitigation a lot better. But even for ourselves or for our closest neighbors, I know at some point you think, is it really all worth it? This is such a hassle. I think for the most part those have been fleeting, and that in its place is actually greater resolve to make a stand and to do what we can. Because that's really, I think that's a testimony to the spirit of the people that first settled this community, 50, even 100 years ago, the hard rock miners, the ranchers that were here 100 years ago. I think that's the spirit of this area, and I think we want to carry that spirit on.